We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Tesam Aleph in Meseches Gittin. This is Gittin Daf 79a. The Mishnah says, Haisa omedes al rosh hagag, if she's standing on the top of the roof. V'zork ula, and he throws the get to her. Kevan sheyigia la'aver hagag, once the get reaches the airspace of the roof, harezu megureshes, she is divorced. Hu milmalo v'hi milmata, let's say he's the one that's above and she's below. V'zork ula, and he throws it to her. Kevan sheyotza mereshus hagag, once it leaves the reshus of the gag, nimchak o nisraf, if it becomes erased or it's burned, harezu megureshes, in this case, she is considered divorced. And the Gemara asks, v'halo minter, but it's not protected. And Rashi says, v'halo minter avir hagag, meaning to say, the airspace of the roof. It said that if she's standing on the top of the roof and he throws it to her, when it reaches the airspace of the roof, she's divorced. Why should she be divorced? It's not a protected area. The wind can blow, and it can blow it away before it comes to rest. Let's say a wind does not blow, something else happens. Let's say a dog comes and takes it, or let's say it rains and it erases it. Why does it say in the Mishnah that she's divorced when it reaches the airspace? Don't we require that it has to be airspace which in the end it will come to rest, and at this point in time it's not in a situation where it's going to be protected. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says, Begag sheyesh lo mako askinon. We're talking about a situation where the roof has a fence, and so therefore it is in a protected area. Ula bar Menashe mishmei da'avime Amar Ula bar Menashe, in the name of Avime, says, Hacha bepachos mishlosh samach legag askinon. Here we're talking about when it's within 3 tfachim of the roof. Techol pachos mishlosh samach legag kagag dami. Anytime it's less than 3 tfachim from the roof, that's considered as if it came to rest on the roof. And Rashi says, "Bepachos migimel avir demasnisin bachi askinan." When we talk about airspace in the Mishnah, we're talking as follows: the havikimandanach. It's really as if it already came to rest. Veilkach kanaso b'hanachaso, and that's why she acquires when it comes to rest. The kevan dehagag gavoa yudhu, since the roof is 10 tvachim high, have a lechatzer hamishtameres lechol denayich begava. It's considered a chatzer that is secure for anything that rests, that comes to rest within it. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. The Mishnah said, Hum milmalo. The Mishnah said, let's say he's the one that's above and she is below, and then he throws it to her. The moment it leaves the Rishus Hagag, so she's considered to be divorced, even if it later, as it's coming down, it becomes erased or it gets burned, she's still considered to be divorced. And the Gemara asks along the same lines, V'halo minter, but it's not secure, it's not protected. And Rashi says, V'halo minter, de kosalka daidach. Right now we think, Shagag gavoa mechomas hachotzer, that the roof is higher than the wall of the chotzer, the wall of the courtyard. So how could it say in the Mishnah that the moment it leaves the rishus of the roof, she's considered divorced? But again, it's not going to come to rest. Even if a fire doesn't come, isn't it possible for a wind to blow and blow it outside of the walls? It's not in a protected area. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. So the Gemara continues. Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says, "Kegon shayum mechitzos atachtonos, odfos al ha'elyonos." The case over here is that the lower walls, meaning the walls that surround the courtyard, are actually higher than the upper walls. It's higher than the walls that surround the roof. So the moment it leaves the airspace of the roof, the get is actually enclosed within the walls of the courtyard. V'chein Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Oshia. Similarly, Rabbi Elazar says that Rabbi Oshia says, "Kegon shayum mechitzos atachtonos, odfos al ha'elyonos." We're talking about if the walls of the courtyard are higher up than the upper walls, the walls of the roof. V'chein Amar Ula, Rabbi Yochanan, and similarly says Ula, that Rabbi Yochanan says, Kegon sheyum mechitzos hatachtonos, odfos al halyonos. We're talking about a situation where the lower walls are higher than the upper walls. And Rashi says, sheyum mechitzos hatachtonos shel chotzer, meaning again, the walls of the chotzer, odfos al maka shel gag, they go higher than the fence that's around the roof. Techinafik migag matal aver mechitzos, the moment it leaves the airspace of the roof, it's within the airspace of the mechitzos of the chotzer. And the reason why it needs to be higher, the Rashi just points out that the walls have to be higher because if you're going to throw it over the walls of the roof, it's going to be in an upwards trajectory. So therefore, the walls that are around the chotzer have to be a little bit higher, so that the moment that it leaves the airspace of the roof, it is entering the airspace of the chotzer. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Rabbi Abba l'Ula, Rabbi Abba says to Ula, Keman, so who does this follow? This answer follows Karebi, it seems to follow Rebbe. The Amar Kluta Kamishon Chadamya, when it comes to Hilchas Shabbos, Rebbe says that if something is enclosed, it's considered as if it came to rest. Rashi explains, Kluta B'socha Aver, if something's within the airspace, Kamishon Chol Oretz, it's as if it came to rest on the earth. The Tanya, as we learned in a Brisa, Zorik B'Shabbos, the case over here is as follows. Let's say a person throws something on Shabbos, Meir Rishos HaRabim, Leir Rishos HaRabim, he throws something from one Rishos HaRabim to another Rishos HaRabim, Rishos HaYachid Be'emsa, and there's a private domain in the middle, Rebbe Mechayev v'Chachamim Potrim. So in that case, Rebbe says Chayev and the Chachamim say Potter, and meaning to say that it goes through the Rishos HaYachid, but it never comes to rest in the Rishos HaYachid. And Rebbe is saying, but still it's Kluta, since it's within the airspace of the Rishos HaYachid, so therefore it's considered as if it came to rest, and that seems to be what we're saying over here as well. Is that what we're saying, that we're only following Rebbe? Amar Le, so he said back to him, again this is Ula responding to Rabbi Abba, Afilu Tema Rabbanan. You could even say that over here we're following the Rabbanan when it comes to get. Adkan lo pligi Rabbanan led the Rebbe Elolinian Shabbos. The whole machlokus between the Rabbanan and Rebbe was only in terms of Hilchas Shabbos. Aval hacham misham in Turehu, but here the reasoning is because it's in a protected, it's in a secure area, v'hakam minter, and it's protected, and therefore over here, even if you don't hold like Rebbe, Kluta Kamisha Chadamya, but here it's going to be considered protected, and therefore she is divorced. V'chein amar Rabbi Asi, Rabbi Yochanan, similarly, Rabbi Asi says that Rabbi Yochanan says, Kigon shayu mechitzas hatachtonos odvos al alyonos. Again, we're talking about when the lower walls are higher than the upper walls. Amar le Rabbi Zer le Rabbi Asi. Again, Rabbi Zer says to Rabbi Asi, Kiman karebi damar kluta kamishon chadami. Who does this follow? Are we following Rebbe who holds kluta kamishon cha? Amar le said to him the same answer. Afilu temer Rabbanan. We could even say it's the Rabbanan. Adkan lo pligi Rabbanan led the Rebbe elolin in Shabbos. The whole machlokus between the Rabbanan and Rebbe is only by Hilchas Shabbos. Aval hacham mishum in Turihu. But here the issue is that it has to be protected. It has to be secure. V'akaminter, and it is protected, and that's why she is divorced. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said nimchak if it becomes erased, meaning to say again, if it enters the airspace of the chutzner and then it becomes erased as it's continuing downward, it's still considered a good gerushin. The moment it enters the airspace, the protected airspace of the chutzner, she is divorced. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba bar Avua. Rav Nachman says that Rabba bar Avua says, Lo shonu ela shenimchak derech yerida. This whole halach is only true if it becomes erased. At least it's going in a downward trajectory. If it's a downward trajectory and it's in a protected area, then she's divorced. Aval nimchak derech aliyah, but if it gets erased while it's still in the upward trajectory, meaning to say, let's say he throws it from the roof and it's still moving upwards, even though it now has entered the airspace of the chutzner and it's surrounded by the walls of the chutzner, but still, if it's going upward or low, then we would not say this. In other words, then she would not be divorced. My time, what's the reason? Because it's not going in the direction where it's coming to rest. It has to be going towards coming to a rest, meaning it has to be in a downward trajectory. Only in that situation, when it's going downward, so then we say it's called a nesina. As Rashi says, Eina migureshes the derech siluko lo mikri nesina. If it's going upward, that's not called giving it to her. Ela derech anacha, so it has to be going towards coming to a rest, lavo l'reshusa, to come to a reshus. Only in that situation. That's why derech aliyah, she would not be divorced. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, nisraf, let's say it becomes burned. Again, it enters the secure airspace of the chutzner and gets burned before it comes to rest. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba bar Avua. Rav Nachman says that Rabba bar Avua says, Lo shanu ela shekadim get l'deleka. This is only true if the get is first before the fire. Aval kidma deleka leget. But if the fire is already there before the get, so low, so then no, it would not be good. My time, what's the reason? Meikar l'sreifa kazal. There, right away from the outset, it was going to be burned, and therefore we would say that it is not considered to be a gerishin. Rashi says, shekadam get l'deleka shekidma zrikas haget b'chatzar, meaning the throwing of the get in the chatzar has to come first. Kodem shetehei hadeleka ba'aver hachatzar, before there's actually a fire in the airspace of the chutzner. But if there's a fire in the airspace of the chutzner before the zrikas haget b'chatzar, before the throwing of the get to the chutzner, there's already a fire in the chutzner, so then it would be a problem. That's already considered that from the outset it is not meant to come to rest, and therefore she is not divorced. Again, that's what it means to say meikara l'sreifa kazal. If the fire came first, then it's a situation where already from the outset it's considered like it's going to be burned. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Chisda says, Reshuyos chalukos begittin. When it comes to Gittin, the different Reshuyos are divided up. Rashi explains, Reshuyos chalukos legittin, im hishilo habal makom bechatzeru. Let's say the husband lends out an area in his chatzer to the wife, lekabolas gita, for the purpose of her receiving her get, lo hishila gago obeso. So then if it was a place in the chatzer, he has not lent her a place on his roof or in his house. Velo amrinan lo kapid. We don't say he's not makvid what the location is. He's only talking about one location. We've mentioned this earlier, the trei makomos lo mushli. People don't lend out two areas. If it's an area within the chutzner, then it's only an area within the chutzner. That does not include areas in other places like the roof or the house. And Rashi continues, Mishum demaisia la raya mimas nisin nakat lahacha. Since we're going to bring a proof from our Mishnah to this issue, so that's why we discuss this over here. And so again, Rav Chisda is saying, Reshuyos chalukos begittin. Essentially, people don't lend out two places. Amar le Rami bar Chama l'Rava. Rami bar Chama says to Rava, Minol le l'sabaha. Where does the elder know this? Amar le said to Mas Nisani. It's a Mishnah. It's our Mishnah. Haiso medes al rosh hagag v'zar kula. The Mishnah said, if she's standing on the top of the roof and he throws it to her, kevan shegia get la'aver hagag harezu megureshes. Since once the get reaches the airspace of the roof, she's divorced. But ma'askina. Now, what's the case over here? Ilema begag dida v'chotzer dida. If the case is she owns the roof and the chotzer, lama li'aver hagag. Why does it have to reach the airspace of the roof? The chotzer already, it's a divorce. Ela begagdi de v'chotzer didei. Rather, you'll say it's his roof and it's his chotzer. So ki yagil la'aver hagag ma'have. Even if it reaches the airspace of the roof, of course, why should she be divorced? What's the difference? It's his roof also. Ela pshita. Rather, it's obvious. Begagdi de v'chotzer didei. Obviously, the first case of the Mishnah, it's her roof and it's his chotzer, and that's why it has to enter the airspace of the roof for her to be divorced. Now, now let's look at the end of the Mishnah. Hu milmala v'hi milmata. In the reverse case, he's above and she's below. V'zar kulon, he throws it to her kevan sheyatza merishas hagag. Once it leaves the airspace of the roof, nimchak o nisraf, if it's erased or it's burned, harezu meguresha, she's divorced because it entered her airspace. So over here, v'i begag dida v'chotzer didei. Now over here, if it's her roof and it's his chotzer, that's exactly the opposite. Amai megureshes, why should she be divorced? Ella, rather, what do you have to say? Begag didei v'chotzer dida. You'll have to say the end case of the Mishnah is it's his roof and it's her chotzer. Does that make sense to say that the Mishnah is just switching the circumstances? Reisha begag dida v'chotzer didei, seifa begag didei v'chotzer dida. The first part of the Mishnah is talking about her roof and his chotzer, and the end of the Mishnah is talking about his roof and her chotzer. Does that make sense? El alav, rather, is it not really what it's saying? Is what we said above. It's saying Reshuyos chalukos begittin. It's saying what Rav Chisda said. It means to say the osh lamakom, that the osh lamakom, he lent her a space in his property, and the point is the chad makom mushli inshi. A person lends out one area. Trei makomos lo mushli inshi. A person doesn't lend out two areas, and so therefore that's what's going on over here. That's why there's one of these spaces is going to be hers, but not both of them. If he's throwing it towards the roof, so then it's the roof, it's an area on the roof he's lending her. If he's throwing it from the roof to the chotzer, it's an area in the chotzer, and that's what's going on in the Mishnah. It's a support for what Rav Chisda said, Reshuyos chalukos begittin. But the Gemara continues, Amar Leh, he said back to him, Midiyirya, what do you have to say that for? Dilma ha-kedisa v'ha-kedisa, maybe the Reish and the Seifa are each talking about different circumstances. Reisha begagdi da v'chotzer didei. The first part of the Mishnah is talking about her roof and his chotzer, and Seifa begagdi dei v'chotzer dida. And the Seifa at the end of the Mishnah is talking about his roof and her chotzer. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, Shalosh midos begittin. There are three areas where when it comes to Hilchas Gittin, the rules are different than in other areas of halacha. Number one, Hada Amar Rebbe, that which Rebbe said, Kluta Kamisha Huncha. Rebbe said that if something is in the airspace, so it's as if it came to rest, which we mentioned above. Upligi Rabbanan Alan, the Rabbanan disagree with Rebbe. Hanimili Linyan Shabbos. That whole discussion is only when it comes to Hilchas Shabbos. Aval Hacha Misham Inturehu, but when it comes to get, the whole issue is that it has to be a secure area. Minter, and it's in a secure area, so therefore we don't apply that rule. When it comes to Hilchas Gittin, it's a unique situation. And the second situation, V'hadamar Rav Chisda, that which Rav Chisda said, Noatz kana b'rishus hayachid, if a person embeds a reed in rishus hayachid in a private domain, over rosho traskel, and then on top of the kana there's a basket, v'zorak v'nachal gavav, and he throws something that comes to rest in the basket, afilu gavoa mea amma, even if it's 100 amos high, he's chayiv, l'fisha rishus hayachid ola ad l'rakia, because rishus hayachid stretches up to the heavens. Hanimili linyan Shabbos, again, that's all true only when it comes to Hilchas Shabbos. Aval hacha mishum inturehu, but here when it comes to Gerisha, it has to be in a secure area, v'halo minter, and that would not be considered a secure area. And Rashi explains Shalosh Midos Begitin Chalukos Midin Shari Sur. And the point is that when it comes to Get Isha, it's different in these three areas. It's different than by other Isurim. Hani Mili Depligi Rabbanan Aleh. The first one is when we're talking about the issue of Kluta Kamisha Huncha. The Rabbanan only argue over there, but they wouldn't argue over here because it's considered secure. And the second case, the case here particularly is that the person, when he embeds the reed in this Rosh Hashanah, so it actually is higher than the walls of the Chatzar. If he throws from Rosh Hashanah and it lands in the basket that's on top of the reed, he's chayiv. That's considered coming to rest in Rosh Hashanah. Because the airspace of Rosh Hashanah that goes all the way up to the heavens. Now, even though the airspace of Rosh Hashanah does not go that high, but the airspace of Rosh Hashanah does. As we say in Meseches Shabbos, it's only considered that it came to rest on the earth, even though it's in this very high up basket. That's only true when it comes to Hilchos Shabbos. Let's say you would have a courtyard that belongs to the wife, and there's a reed and it's higher than the walls, and it comes to rest on the top. She would not be considered divorced. It's not going to ever come to rest on the ground itself. The Rami because if the wind blows, it's going to blow outside the walls. The time of the Gita, and when it comes to get, it needs to be a secure chatzar, who dumya diyad, it has to be similar to her hand. V'halo minter, and over here it's not secure, it's not protected. We will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Tes Amud Beis.